Hello again, art history students. Welcome to Elements of Art Part 2, which is going to deal with just space and color, right? All the other elements we talked about in the previous lecture, Part 1, Unit 1, Lecture 2 was that one. This is Lecture 3. Space and color are the largest two elements of art. We'll get into why here in just a little bit. And I want you guys to, we're just going to jump right in. All right, so we're talking about the fundamental languages of art, right? So these are kind of like the building blocks, the ingredients of art. We talked all about line, shape, form, mass, all of those previously. Today we're talking about space and color, and then next lecture we're going to talk about the principles, which is how these elements of art are arranged. So let's jump right into space. Space is the biggest of all of the elements of art. And the reason is it interacts with all others and gives them definition. So think about it like this. If you have a blank white piece of paper and you draw a line on it, suddenly there is space above the line, below the line, right? Like there's just suddenly this space that's created from any of the other elements. It's what gives them definition. There's a lot of vocab right there. We're going to break all of that down individually in the next seconds, but you may want to come back to this slide if you need we need that information written out for you. So space is real space. It has length, width, and height, and you can move within real space, you as a human being. So that's what we are looking at here. We're looking at architecture, a space that you can actually move around in and exist in. A lot of times what artists are trying to do is recreate real space on a two-dimensional surface with just length and width. That's what we see here, right? So this is a depiction of that real space, and it has this illusion that you as a little person here could walk inside of that space and move deeper into that image, right? So that's what this illusion is coming from, and there's a vast array of things that artists do to build that illusion of space. So we're going to go through some of those. The first one, and probably most simple, is size, position, and overlapping of shapes. This has to do with the foreground, middle ground, background. Things that are closer to us, like this woman here, right, are perceived as larger and in more detail than things that are farther away, right? This tree that's close to us has, individual details of leaves and stuff, and then these ones that are really far away in the background we can't really make out as much detail, right? So that's one of the most basic ways, and that's going to lead us into our next slide. Right, so there are three different basic types of perspective: atmospheric perspective, linear perspective, and isometric. You're probably familiar with the first two. The second one, or the third, I'm sorry, you might not be as familiar with, but don't worry, we're going to talk about that in length. So these are the three basic types of perspective. Keep that in mind for tests. All right, so the first is atmospheric perspective. This deals with overlapping foreground, middle ground, background. Basically, objects are the farther away they get, the less detail that you see. And that's because air is not completely transparent. We, living where we do, are acutely aware of this because of the mountains, right? The farthest mountain away is always going to have that darker blue-gray appearance to it, and then the ones that are closest to us are going to have greens, or if it's fall, the colors of them, that kind of stuff. If you've ever gone anywhere where it's really flat, if you grew up here and you're gone somewhere where it's really flat, it's difficult to judge distance because of where we live in the mountains. Right, so that's atmospheric perspective. Hopefully that helps you remember that one. Next is linear perspective. Linear perspective was developed, at least the Renaissance gets credit, the Italian Renaissance gets credit for the development of linear perspective. It has a couple of basic things that are always going to be present in any sort of linear perspective. One is going to be a horizon line. The horizon line is going to separate the sky from the earth. There will be vanishing points, either one vanishing point or two, right? And they're going to exist on that horizon line. And then all objects are going to kind of converge visually at that that vanishing point, either one or two of them, right? So this is based off observation of space and how things kind of visually look as they recede. Probably around the 4th grade, if you took like art in the 4th grade, you drew the railroad tracks going back into space, right? I'm hoping that you did. So that might be a little bit of refresher for like, yeah, I do remember doing that, right? So think back to 4th grade-ish, maybe. All right, so this is a good example of one-point perspective. We see the horizon line here in red. So we've got sky and earth, and then all of these lines of architectural things, right, on this bridge are all converging back to that vanishing point. This artist has placed a person kind of right over that. So the vanishing point is right behind that gentleman's head, which kind of makes him the focal point, or our eyes are leading towards him in this painting. So even the shadows are in perspective here, right, as they are converging back on that. So that's just an example of one-point perspective. And there are many other examples, but we're going to keep marching on for time. So the last of the three is isometric perspective. You probably might not be as familiar with this. The term isometric comes from Greek, meaning equal measure, right? You might think back to isometric triangles. That's something if you took geometry, right? So this method is very common in the East, right? So in China, Japan, areas of the world like that. It's based off parallel lines, and it is not realistic by Western art traditions. But there's a very specific reason why this type of perspective is in use, and I'm going to show you a good example. So this is a segment of a larger scroll, and the scroll tells this larger story of sort of this emperor's journey and whatnot. That's not really what's really important. I want you guys to focus on this building right here. So it looks like it's in perspective. It looks like the lines of it are going to converge kind of on a point somewhere up in here, but they're not. They're actually parallel with each other. So let's go to the next slide. Right? So they never fully converge. So every building in this image does not recede to any single vanishing point because they're all parallel. And if you're thinking to yourself, well, why? What's the difference, right? This has to do with your cone of vision and what you see and how this image is perceived. So it's part of a larger scroll, like I said, that is 65 feet long. So you cannot take in the whole thing all at once. You have to take it in section by section. And if you've ever tried to take a panoramic picture on your phone, things start to get weird and warped kind of at the edges. And these parallel lines that isometric perspective uses keeps everything kind of in perspective. So no matter what section of the scroll you're at and looking at in the story that's being told, it looks in perspective. It looks realistic at that segment. So that's why isometric perspective is used. It's actually a very important kind of trick because you're perceiving only part of the artwork at once. Why you're only perceiving part of the artwork at any given time is because of your cone of vision. So your cone of vision is basically what you can take in visually at any one given time, right? You put your arms out, you wear a brim of a hat, you don't see those things because they're outside of your cone of vision. Now, when objects come directly at our cone of vision, right, sometimes it can create this really interesting visual thing that happens. So let's look at that in play. This is called foreshortening. So let's break this down a little bit. So I've got another one of my awesome superhero kind of references here. So we've got Superman. He's got his fist and his whole entire head appear to be the same size, right? Now, why is that? It's not that he's got some giant mega fist. It's because it's coming right at our cone of vision, right? And when things come right at our cone of vision, there's kind of like this extreme elongation of them, like this kind of like enlargement of them. And it attracts our eyes as human beings because we want to know if something is coming at our face, right? That's why people, when you're 8th grade or something, your friends like, you flinched, right? That's that kind of thing. Our eyes naturally don't want to get hit in the face. So it creates this image that's coming at us, and it's very interesting for our eyes. So that's foreshortening. Okay, next we're going to talk about color. So color is the most vivid of the elements. It can interact with all of them, but also it does not need to, right? This is the one that attracts our attention the most and excites our emotions. So lines can be very attracting, or they can, kind of catch our eye, but nothing catches our eye like color. We, as human beings, our eyes are developed in order to find warm colored fruit in amongst cool colored leaves, right? Like we naturally have an attraction for that because we're looking for food and seeking food. So color perception is subjective, it is cultural, it is personal. We're going to talk more about that. There's a lot of vocabulary that goes along with color, so brace yourself. All right, first and foremost is we're building on vocabulary here. So previously in the last lecture, we talked about the value scale, right? So warm and darks, and this was what gave shapes form, right? So something can visually, that's how we perceive its shadows and whatnot, and that's what gives it the illusion of three-dimensionality. So color is hue, and hue is this term for the standard color that's perceived. So here in this, we've got this example of red, blue, and yellow, and we have some of them that are blocked out with these black. That's the standard hue, right? That's kind of like what we perceive. When we think of red, we think of this red. Now, everything to the lighter side of that is what's known as a tint. And then everything to the darker side of that is what's known as a shade. So value scale exists for every color, right? And within every color, there are going to be tints and shades on either side of the hue, right? So hue is, it's not in the center, right? Because different colors perceive the hue at different places, but this is like a marker for every color that has a hue. All right, I know, it was a lot of vocab words. So the hue is the understood perceived color, and then tints are to the lighter side and shades are to the darker side. Now, building vocabulary again. So this is monochromatic. Monochromatic is an artwork that uses the value scale of only one hue, right? This artwork is the value scale of blues, right? So try to keep that in mind. There'll probably be a test question about it. All right, so let's look at this artwork, right? What's going on here, right? I really like when we get to do this in class together, but we're in the online world. So this artwork is from 1906. I'm not real big about asking about dates, and I will let you know the one, maybe 2 times in the semester when I'm like, you need to know this date. But I'm just pointing it out to give you a little bit of context of time and history. And when this painting was created, it was really criticized for not, the colors seemed so arbitrary and they were everyone. No, there are no orange trees. What's going on in this? But if we think about it in the sense of value, or I'm sorry, as color, as warmth or coolness. So let's look at this tree right here on this side. Above this grouping of leaves is the tree is orange, right? Like the sun is hitting it, like it's getting hot. And just below that grouping of trees, the trunk is blue, right? So what this artist is, long before there were ever infrared cameras or anything like that, is really thinking about how heat is at play and what perception of color there would be for that heat. Right? So in the context of the time that it was created, this was really revolutionary. It was thinking about color in this, or what color could represent in this whole kind of new way. Now, this brings us to color temperature. There are very, very few things in the world that all people, all of humanity, all cultures, religions, groups, etc., wherever you live, everyone agrees on. There are very few things, and color temperature is one of them. So people perceive yellows, oranges, and reds as warm, and purples, blues, and greens, as cool, right? That is one of the very few things that is universal in the world. So most other things with color are very individual perceptive. So let's talk about that now. If you're not familiar, that's the color wheel. I hope you are familiar with it. There's a lot of information there that we are not going to get into in this class. All right, so interpreting color and perceptions. So color perception has a lot to do with culture, right? A lot to do with where you grow up, but it also has a lot to do with your personal life and your personal story, right? Perceptions of color are very subjective. So I have two small examples just to point this out. So if you're not familiar with the life of Vincent van Gogh, you might get to be a little bit more familiar with it as we go through this class. But at one point in time, Vincent van Gogh lived in this yellow house. All right. And at that yellow house was a really positive time in his life. He lived with another artist named Paul Gauguin, and this was a time when he was painting all the time, right? Things were really good. So he has a very positive perception of this yellow color because of his time living in this yellow house. Now, on the contrary, if you've ever read this book called The Yellow Wallpaper, it is about this woman who kind of has like a psychological meltdown and then gets locked in a room. That's like what the doctor tells her needs to happen. And that room has yellow wallpaper. This is a very negative experience for this lady in the story. And thus the title of the book is The Yellow Wallpaper. And it's very negative association with the color yellow. So it's just two examples of same color, two different people having very different experiences with that color. So with that in mind, I want to ask you, right? So don't Google this or anything like that. Just stick with me for one moment. So I want you to make an assessment. Do you want to go to this place, right? So take a kind of survey of the room. Do you feel welcomed in there? Do you want to stay, right? So whether you said yes or no is not a big deal, but I want to kind of break the painting down color-wise for you, and then we'll kind of see how that color perception is. So when we do this in the classroom, there's always someone by default who's like, I want to stay, I want to go there because there's a pool table. But I always want to make the point of, do you see anybody playing pool? Do you see anybody really interacting in this space, right? If we just take one moment to kind of take the visuals in of the space, right? We have all these people, but they're not interacting with each other. Some of them are alone. This guy here, he has a lab coat on. Apparently bartenders or kind of cafe tenders way back in the day used to wear a lab coat. That was like their uniform. So that's how we know who he is. He's not welcoming you like, hey, Norm, right? He's just kind of standing there, kind of like, oh gosh, another person coming in the door. So let's talk more about color again. So what are the main colors? They're yellow, green, and red. Now, let's first think about the green. Is it a vibrant, earthy green of fresh leaves, right? Or is it kind of a sicklier green? So how are the colors affecting the feeling or the mood of the room, right? Does it feel cool and calm, or does it feel kind of warm and sweaty a little bit, right? So, and then why do you think Van Gogh portrayed this place this way? So I'm going to make a couple more points about the painting before I kind of give you what you may already be coming to the conclusion of. So in theory, you've like opened the door, and this is the night cafe, and there are chairs strewed around. Every table in the cafe is dirty and cluttered with stuff, right? There's the bartender who doesn't seem to be very interested in you. He's just kind of staring you down. All the other patrons, nobody's talking to you or interacting with you. There's theoretically no one to play pool with if you wanted to play pool. And then there's this color of the room. Now, this is a place that serves alcohol. And if you've ever in your life maybe drank too much and thrown up, more than likely the color of the throw up was probably this yellow, green, maybe a little bit of red in there, right? If you were really sick, right? So it is actually by design that Vincent van Gogh painted this way. And he did so because he wanted to portray this as a place that makes people sick. He wanted sickly yellows and sickly greens and this kind of blood red bile-y color on the wall, right? And it's because he wanted you to not want to go there and not want to be there. So that is a little bit about how an artist can use color perception in order to make you emote a specific way. I oftentimes, when I teach this class in the winter, students are always like, I'm going to go there because it looks warm. But is it like a good warm or is it kind of a sweaty warm, right? So you can obviously make your own conclusions about the image. All right, so these are key terms for this lecture. There was a lot. This was a big lecture, and stay tuned because now we're talking about the discussion. Okay, there's a lot of text going on here, but you can find this information online, obviously. So the elements participation. So for this lecture, or I'm sorry, this lecture's discussion, what you need to do is, now that you know all of the elements of art, and you've now concluded all of them with the previous lecture and this one, what I want you to do is I want you to take your phone, right, and stage a photo that displays one of the elements of art. It's completely your choice. This can be inside, outside. You can set up objects. You can find something that's out there with reality. Have a little bit of fun with it. Try to remember all of the elements of art in order to kind of find a good example of one, and then post that. But do not tell us what you're posting. Do not say, I found this and it looks like line, or it looks like value, or it's time and motion. Do not tell us. Then you're going to look at your other fellow students and basically try to guess what their what element of art they are trying to portray. So you need to give a little bit of information about that. You need to say, I think you're portraying line because I can follow all the P's lined up, or whatever the case may be. You need to give more. You're not just writing line, shape, color, right? Give it a couple, give it a sentence or two. Remember, you must comment on your fellow students' work in order to receive full credit. So thank you for tuning in.